Hello, I'm Jamie Rylett. Thank you for joining us for Yoga Evolve's Introduction to Yin Yoga class. Paul Gully says that Yin Yoga targets from the navel to the knees. So in this class, we're going to be working the hips through all their degrees of freedom, and we're also going to be targeting the spine. This is a very slow practice, so it gives me time to explain the basic concepts of Yin Yoga as we go along. So we're going to start on our back in pentacle pose, so laying in this big star shape. And we're just going to take these first few moments of the class, start to get into that yoga mindset. So any of those plans you have for afterwards, thoughts of things you should have done before class, just letting all of that go and starting to become completely present. And if at any stage during this practice the mind does start to wander away, we can always bring it back to the mantra of the breath. And slowly starting to make your way up. And to come into child's pose, taking our knees roughly mat distance apart, walking forwards with our hands, placing our forehead on the mat, and trying to sit back on the heels. I'm just going to begin in this gentle forward fold. So as I said in the introduction, Yin is a very slow practice. We can hold postures for anything from 3 to 20 minutes. Although in this class, we're going to be working in the 3 to 5 minute range. So if you're practicing flow styles like Ashtanga, Vinyasa, you'll be used to flowing through different postures and working the muscles through this repetitive movement. Whereas in this class, we're trying to work deeper into the joints, ligaments, and tendons. And we'll do that through stillness. Staying as we are, bringing the right hand on top of the left and using the fingertips to walk your way towards the train line side of the room, feeling that extension through the right hand side of the body. So the basic principles of Yin Yoga are that we always want to come into the pose initially to an appropriate depth. So you might call that playing your edge or finding the point of first resistance. And once we find that point that Bernie Clark calls the Goldilocks position, not too hot, not too cold, then we resolve to remain still. And the only exception to this is if the body starts to open up and invites us to move deeper into the posture. So maybe now you can start to walk your hands a little bit further towards the left. Or if we start to feel in any kind of pain, and then it's always okay to back off or modify the posture. And now walking the hands back to the center. We're going to prepare to go the opposite way, so bringing left on top of right. Using the fingertips of the right hand to walk your way to the right edge of the mat. And feeling that extension through the left-hand side of the body. So the important thing to remember in this practice is that it is your practice. So everything I say is merely a suggestion. If you need to modify a posture, if you need to come out of a pose early, if you want to take child's pose at any time, all of these options are valid. And coming into the last couple of breaths on this side. And walking the hands back to the center. And making our way back to a kneeling position. We're going to come into a very similar posture called melting heart. It's similar in appearance, but the feel is completely different. So we're keeping our hips directly above our knees. And again, we're walking forwards with our hands here, placing either our forehead or maybe even your chin on the mat, if that's comfortable for the neck. So the intention of this pose is to work into the shoulders, and this is also a back bend for the upper and mid back. So when we go into each posture, we always have an intention, and then we pay attention to how we feel within the pose. So if you feel anything today, there's a sharp stabbing sensation, anything electrical in nature, maybe a tingling or pins and needles feeling in the hands in this pose, then that may be an indication to back off. So if that is the case here, if you are feeling that tingling in the fingers and the hands, maybe take your arms slightly wider. If this doesn't help, maybe come down onto your forearms. If this still doesn't help, maybe bring one arm in as a pillow and switch throughout the posture. One of my yin instructors, Norman Blair, often says that the most important flexibility is the flexibility between your ears. So going into each pose, listening to where your body is today, listening to the signals that your body's giving you. So often it's tempting to just try and tough out the pose. But we're trying to move away from this mentality of striving and forcing in this practice. Move towards listening and allowing the body to open up in its own time. And we're coming into the last few breaths here. And slowly making your way back to child's pose. This time bringing the knees together, resting the hands by your feet, taking this narrow child's pose, giving the shoulders a break. And from here, making our way back to our knees, we're going to come into a very simple posture called toe stand. So simply sitting back on our toes. Simple doesn't always mean easy. Staying here is often a challenge. If this does get too much, feel free to come up onto your knees. And whilst we're here, we can also start to loosen the trap. So bringing our right hand to the base of the spine, allowing our head to fall towards the left ear, and then using this left hand just to place on top of the head, just applying that little bit of extra weight. Remembering that this practice is about allowing, so we're not forcing the head down, we're just resting the hand. So we store a lot of tension in our traps from any kind of overhead pressing movements, by walking around with our shoulders by our ears. If you're doing any kind of inversion practice, this is just one way to start to release that tension and a way to take your mind off what's going on in your feet here. Bringing that hand to support the chin, returning the head to the center, shaking out the arms, and taking the opposite hand to the base of the spine, allowing the head to fall towards the right shoulder, using the right hand to place on top of the head. So not only are we working into the traps here, we're also trying to maintain the flexibility of our feet. So our feet are often literally the furthest thing from our mind. And when we lose this flexibility in the feet, we lose our sense of balance. So the Taoists have a saying, open toes, open mind. I've no idea what that means, but maybe that's of some comfort for you for the last minute or so in this pose. We're returning the head back to the center. Finally, we're going to bring the hands into prayer, but behind our back. So pushing the palms together, rolling the shoulders back. If this is not accessible, feel free just to take a grip of your fingertips, maybe even just rest the hands. So we're trying to roll the shoulders back into a good position here. Trying to avoid what Kelly Starrett calls the douchebag shoulder position. When you see these guys walking around, their shoulders hunched forward, we're trying to avoid that. We're rolling the shoulders back. Being active with the palms, relaxed with the legs. And coming into the last couple of breaths here now. Bringing the hands forward, turning the feet over, taking any movement that feels nice for you now. Maybe it's nice just to come onto the top of your feet and rock back. Maybe you want to walk your toes out. Often it's nice to have some movement after a prolonged period of stillness. And from here, making our way onto our stomachs, bringing our elbows directly underneath our armpits, coming into Sphinx pose. So we're just taking this slight back bend here. If we want to reduce this further, we can take the elbows a little bit further forwards. If we want to take a really lazy version, we can rest our chin in our hands. Or if we want to make this slightly more strenuous, we can bring our heels in towards our glutes. So finding whichever version works for you. This will vary from person to person. The most important thing here is that we're taking our spine through extension. So often we spend our days with our spines in flexion, hunched over desks, cycling, driving, checking how many new followers we've got. And it's very rare that we move our spine in this direction. If we want to take this further, we can start to come into seal pose. So we can turn those hands out like a seal's flippers, and we can straighten the arms, starting to really stretch out the core. We can combine that with bringing the heels in towards the glutes. If you're one of those Cirque du Soleil types, you can take your head back and rest it on the sole of your feet. Not today? Okay, next video. But the point is, if you could do that and you felt very relaxed with your head resting on the soles of your feet, and the person next to you is really feeling this pose in Sphinx pose, and that's actually the person who's getting the main benefit from the posture. So we're trying to move away from what things look like and be more concerned with how they feel. And throughout this practice, if you're feeling it, then you're doing it. We're inside the last minute here now. And wherever you are, return into Sphinx pose. And then preparing to lower yourself all the way to the ground. Pressing yourself back into child's pose. It's a perfect counter pose for any back bend. And coming back to our knees. We're going to prepare to come into low flying dragon. So taking a big step forward with the right foot, bringing our hands down to frame that foot. The key point here is we don't want this right angle, so we don't want this left knee directly under your hip. Sliding that back, trying to take the weight forward, trying to press down equally through the back leg, through the shin, through the top of the foot. And once we're here and we're feeling this in the target area, in the hip flexor and quadricep of this back leg, maybe then we can start to lengthen through the spine, bringing the hands onto the front thigh, taking the crown of the head towards the ceiling, and then continuously just allowing the body to open up and moving slightly deeper into the pose. If you want to add a yang element to this, we can maybe take our hands to the sky, turn the palms to face each other. We can also start to try to twist away from this rear leg. Or we can come to the flying version by coming onto our back toes. But for most people, this will be enough. So again, we're trying to avoid being yang within our yin practice. And as we come towards 90 seconds in the pose, checking in with the body, seeing if it's inviting you to move slightly deeper. Or maybe it's telling you that you've had enough here and you need to back off. And that's fine too, feeling free to come back to low flying dragon at any stage. So this is often a difficult pose for a lot of people. We still have so much tension in our hip flexors from sitting all day in offices. We're literally shortening our hip flexors. When we get to the stage where we have these short, tight hip flexors, it changes our whole posture. It can pull the pelvis out of line. This will lead to weak, overstretched abs, lower back pain, even a lack of shoulder mobility, all from this one area. So this is rarely anyone's favorite posture, but it is one of the most important. And we're inside the last minute here now. Now bringing the hands down to frame that front foot, coming into our low flying dragon, and then just pressing ourselves back into downward facing dog, just walking out the dog. We're not trying to get the heels to the ground here, we're just walking out the last posture. And then taking that right foot to the sky, and then bringing it towards the right knee, right elbow. And then turning the right foot across the mat, placing it down wherever's comfortable and sliding back into our sleeping swan pose. So we're trying to feel this in the outside of this bent leg, to a lesser degree in the hip flexor of the back leg. We don't want to feel this in the knee. So once we're comfortable here, then maybe we can start to move down onto the elbows. Maybe we could make a pillow for our head. Maybe we can rest our head on the mat. All the time trying to keep the weight firmly back in the hips. So whatever points of contact you have with the ground, whether it's elbows, head, fingertips, using them to gently press the weight back into the hips, thinking about keeping the hips square. Remembering what Van der Scarvelli says, do not kill the instinct of the body for the glory of the pose. So feeling free to modify however you see fit here. So there's no dogma attached to the breathing methods that we use in yin yoga. We try and keep the breathing unforced and natural. Sometimes in the latter stages, some of these more difficult postures, it may help you to engage a soft, oceanic Ujjayi breath. And we're coming into the last 4 or 5 breaths here now. And now you're using the hands to raise the chest, keeping the weight pressed back into the hips, coming back into our downward facing dog pose, walking out the dog. You may feel like you'll never walk again, but that will quickly subside. And when you're ready, we'll meet on our backs in pentacle pose, in that big X shape that we started the session in. And we're just going to take a moment here to observe the rebound. So we've done 2 quite intense hip openers. That will have had some effect on the body. So just checking in with the body now, noticing how you feel. Maybe you feel a new sense of openness within the hips. Maybe you just become more aware of the blood, chi and fluid flowing to those stress joints. Maybe you feel a sense of imbalance as we've only worked one side of the body. There's no right or wrong thing that we should feel here. It's just important that we take the time to feel something. And slowly making your way back up to a kneeling position. And prepare to take the dragon lunge on the opposite side. Stepping forward with the left leg this time. Again, sliding that right knee back. Just allowing the weight of the hips to come forward. Pressing down through the whole of that back leg. And when we're ready, maybe we start to come up into the full dragon. Bringing the hands onto the front leg. Taking the crown of the head towards the ceiling. And we've got the option of adding those yang components of taking the hands to the sky and turning away from that rear leg. As we come to 75 seconds in the posture, maybe now the body's starting to loosen up. Maybe we can start to move slightly deeper into the posture. So when people talk about yin yoga, they often talk about it being beneficial for the fascia. Without getting too technical, fascia is like a kind of 3D body stocking. It envelops the whole body from joints, ligaments, bones. Even 30% of muscle is fascia. And this fascia is made up of fibers, cells, and a gel-like substance, which is adhesive in nature. And when we apply a mechanical stimulation for time, this adhesive substance starts to become a lubricant and invites us to move deeper into the posture. So what that means for us in this practice is that when we hold a posture for time, a chemical reaction may occur in the body that invites us to move deeper into the pose. So for this practice, all we need to take away is move away from this mindset of stretch, 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 and start thinking, let go, let go, let go. And let the body open up in its own time. And we're moving inside the last few breaths here. And from here, bringing our hands down to frame that front foot, come into our low flying dragon, keeping the weight back in the hips, pressing ourselves back into our downward facing dog, just gently walking out the dog. And when you're ready, taking that left foot to the sky, then bringing the left knee to left elbow, taking the foot across the mat and placing it down wherever's comfortable, starting to slide back with the right leg, using the hands to keep the weight back in the hips. Once we're feeling this in the right area, in the outside of this glute, in the top of the rear leg, then maybe we come onto the elbows. Maybe we even come onto the forearms. Maybe we even rest our head on the mat. Over time, gently pressing the weight back into the hips. So this may feel like a very different posture on this side. And that's because nobody is symmetrical. The curvature of our bones, the angle of our sockets, this varies from left to right. And sometimes there's quite dramatic differences. Nobody looks like that skeleton that we see in anatomy class. So if it makes sense that this pose will not feel and look the same way from left to right, then it makes sense that it will look completely different from person to person, from mat to mat. And that's why in this practice we're really letting go with how things should look, concentrating more on how they feel. In some of these more difficult postures, sometimes it's nice to use a visualization exercise. So by now you've probably identified an area of constriction and tension within the body. So maybe on your next inhale, you imagine that you're inhaling a healing white light directly to that area of the body. And on the exhale, you exhale out all of that tension and restriction. And now using the hands to raise the chest, keeping the weight back in the hips, pressing yourself back into your downward facing dog, walking out the dog. The sequence gives you a newfound appreciation for downward dog. You start to realize why a dog is a man's best friend. And when you're ready, making your way to your back. Coming back into pentacle pose and spending the next few breaths observing the rebound. Noticing if this feels different to the rebound you observed just a few moments ago. Maybe now you feel more balanced. Maybe it's just a different experience. Maybe you feel a sense of heat coming over the body. Maybe a sense of cold. It's also possible to experience an emotional reaction. It's said that we store emotions in the hips, issues in the tissues. So maybe now you feel a sense of anger, a sense of frustration, a sense of joy, a sense of happiness. All of these things can come up. It's part of the practice to not try to control this, but just to accept it for what it is. And slowly making your way up to a seated position. We are going to come into the Yin Yoga standing sequence, which is only 2 postures, so don't worry. So making our way to our feet, we're going to come down into a squat pose, squatting down, letting our knees point the same way as our feet, and bringing our hands in prayer. And we're going to pray that we're not here for long. And we won't be. This is a shorter hold. If your heels don't touch the ground here, try taking your feet slightly wider. So again, this is part of a basic human movement pattern. If you see babies, they often sit like this. If you visit Asia, you might see whole families having dinner in this posture. But in the West, sometimes we struggle to be here just for a few seconds. So we're really trying to open up the groin, strengthen the ankles here. If this does get too much, feeling free to push up out of a pose and then return to the pose at your leisure. If you have blocks, you can create a little chair and sit down on top of the blocks. That's exactly how I started in this posture. With practice, things do start to loosen up. And we're coming into the last 3 or 4 breaths here. then pressing through the feet, coming up to a standing position, just taking hold of opposite elbows and just hanging here, just dangling. We can take a bend in our knees. We can even let our fingers hang down to the floor. We're just trying to decompress the spine and work into the hamstrings here. But bending the knees as much as you need to. So when we wake up in the morning, we're actually taller than we are by the end of the day. When we're sitting in chairs all day, we're compressing those discs between the vertebrae. This is one way of just trying to regain that length in the spine. And then allowing the fingertips to touch the floor, tucking the chin to the chest, and then just rolling up slowly, slowly, one vertebrae at a time. Last one up is the winner. And when you get to the top, just rolling the shoulders backwards and rolling the shoulders forwards. We have now completed the standing sequence. We can return our way to the ground and make our way to our backs, bringing the knees into the chest and just taking a gentle rocking motion from side to side. We're going to prepare to come into a reclining twist. So keeping both knees together, directly above the hips, and then taking both arms out wide like wings, and allowing the knees to fall to the left-hand side of the body, coming into our reclining twist. We're trying to keep the shoulders and the head grounded, but the head can face towards the knees to really target that right shoulder. We can keep it neutral in the center, or we can turn it away from the knees to start to target the upper back. If your knees don't touch the ground in this pose, you can use that left hand to apply a little bit of extra weight and guide the knees closer to the ground, or you can use a block to support under the knees. So you could take your shoulders to the ground and then use this. There you go. Perfect. It's always nice to add a twist towards the end of the practice to relax the spine, to remove all of the kinks and strains in the back, to restore the equilibrium of the nervous system. This should also be a very yin posture. You should be able to completely relax here. So feeling free to soften the gaze or close the eyes. Just allowing the posture to do all of the work. And if we do get that discomfort we spoke about earlier, that tingling in the hands, listen to your body, bring the hands down alongside the hips, or rest them on top of the ribs. Keeping our legs as they are, but bringing that right hand across the body to join the left. And pausing on your left hand side for a moment. Before making your way onto your back, bringing the knees into the chest, taking that gentle rocking motion. As we prepare to take the pose on the opposite side, so taking the arms wide again, letting the knees fall to the right hand side. Finding the head position that works for you, and feeling free to change this throughout the pose. Really trying to find that complete relaxation here. Enjoying this feeling of doing less but feeling more. I like to read some of the old Buddhist philosophy stories. And I find that a lot of them apply to the practice of yin yoga. There's one story I want to share with you now. It's about a student who decides that he wants to become enlightened. So he seeks out a lama, and he says to the lama, "I want to become enlightened. How long will it take?" And the lama says, 10 years. The student said, "No, this is too long. I'm the best student you've ever had. I'm going to work harder than any of the other students. How long will it take me?" The lama said, 20 years. The student said, "You don't understand. I'm a very fast learner. I'm the most dedicated practitioner. How long do you think I can do it in?" And the lama said, "I think for you it will be 30 years. And it's very much like that in yin yoga. But it's not about the intensity. It's about the time that we spend in each pose. We're coming into the last minute or so here now. So maybe seeing if you can relax a little bit more. And keeping our legs as they are, but bringing that left hand across the body to join the right. Pausing on our right hand side for a moment. And when you're ready, making your way onto your back, bringing the knees into the chest, taking that gentle rocking motion. And then we're going to bring the soles of our feet together, coming into reclining butterfly, Supta Baddha Konasana, allowing the knees to fall out to the sides. Trying to keep a completely flat back here. So the temptation in this pose is to try to force the knees to the ground. And this may cause a rounding of the lower back. So maybe we start with the knees pointing towards the ceiling, and then we just let gravity do the work. Start to move us deeper into the posture. Yin Yoga is a very mindful practice. When we have so long in each posture, we can really start to connect to the sensations within the body. So maybe now you start to notice a feeling of opening in the hips. Maybe you become more aware of blood, chi and fluid flowing through these openings that you've created. And when we practice in this way of trying to anchor into sensations, and this practice becomes almost an active meditation. And if we do start to get distracted by thoughts and the mind does start to wander away, we can always bring it back to that mantra of the breath. And sliding into our final pose, corpse pose or savasana, starting to straighten the legs, bring the hands by your sides, palms facing the sky, shoulders sliding down away from the ears, keeping the back completely flat, so maybe lifting the hips and finding length through the tailbone. And once we've found that place of comfort, closing the eyes and taking these last few moments to start to check in with the body, to observe the natural pulsing and movement of chi through the whole body. As we completely relax, making each breath quieter than the last, and releasing all tension. release, starting to bring some awareness back into the body. We're gently moving your fingers and toes. And in your own time, taking a stretch through the whole body by taking your arms up overhead. And bringing the knees into the chest and turning onto your right hand side. Just pausing here for a moment. Maybe using the right arm as a pillow. And keeping the eyes closed, using the left hand to push your way up to a seated position. Bringing the palms together in prayer at heart center. And gently bowing the head and bringing the fingertips to third eye point. Namaste.